Is this meeting also cancelled? Hey, Jonathan.
I don't think so.
Yeah, I'm not aware if it was.
Yeah, I mean, Michael was saying that he is unavailable specifically for the one following this, which is the Identifying Security Threats Working Group. And so he said that, but see that other people are coming in. Hi, David.
Hey there. All right, so we are here to answer questions, and things. Do we have questions? So maybe we should, my understanding of this public planning meeting was more for an opportunity for people to ask questions of us and plans and things. Oh, and you know what? We have public meeting notes, but we don't have anything for today. Can I propose that we fix that?
Yes, please.
I will start because
David, ask us questions.
why aren't we done yet?
I know.
Okay. Let's see here. I have added myself. Okay. Let me post this. All right. So, I mean, I don't think so. My understanding of this meeting was not that we were trying to have it says public meeting. I think it's at one time it was called public planning, but I think it's more of an ability for people to ask and find out what's going on. Is that a reasonable, basically the topic / agenda is basically allowing people to ask questions. That's what I think the goal is. If I misunderstood or misremember, I'm in a lot of meetings, so.
Yeah, I think that's the go. I know Michael usually has like a presentation just giving like project updates.
Right.
But I think we'll wait to see if
Yeah, I thought he was going to be here, to be honest, and I don't see him.
So Michael posted in the Identifying Security Threats group that the meeting following this of the Identifying Security Threats, he won't be able to join that. So he asked somebody to take over and I volunteered. I was not sure about this one. So yeah, apparently it looks like that he may be unavailable for this one as well.
Okay. And he may have been trying to rush a whole bunch of cancellations and announcements and miss this one. And that's, if he had to do that without any prior warning, then that's totally expected or understandable. Okay. Yeah, because usually he gives a brief presentation update, and I wasn't prepared to do the same for him because I thought he was doing that.
David, you didn't prepare for something. You didn't. I was expecting a full blown like, what is AO? How does it work?
Jonathan, be careful because we're the faces. So
yeah,
you were not prepared.
I will also note that doesn't take me long at all to riff on something, and I think I do know something about this topic. All of us should be able to give the brief. What is AO's pitch? Hopefully by now. That said, I have to admit I'm in so many different things. There have been some announcements of some reviews, and including things that are kind of AO adjacent as well. So we can certainly talk about those things. But and we have Sebastian Crane. I'm going to add you to the list of people here. Okay. So I guess the question here is, are there any questions from the public? and we will try to answer. So, Sebastian, that includes you, I think.
Yes, I represent the public. Hello.
There we go. Hi
How are you?
there.
Hi, public.
Hi, public. Yeah. Do you? I'm guessing that you already know what Alpha Omega is, but I mean, we can go give that pitch too. But there's no point if everybody here already knows what it is. I think we do. So
Yeah, well, Sebastian Crane knows what it is, but the general public doesn't quite yet. So.
Oh, okay, all right. Well, you know what? I don't think that we need to rehash that unless somebody here actually wants that, because.
Oh, come on! This call is recorded. It's going to go up on YouTube. They want to know.
All right. I mean,
I'm kidding. I'm kidding.
Hey, you know what? I'm good with that. I mean, but as far as I know, Alpha Omega is still the same basic construct. Alpha is focusing on relatively few critical projects, or fun to really improve them, and then the Omega is all the analysis. I do think that there's something that is slowly transitioning. Well, I'm not transitioning exactly, but at least for now, a tweak in the Omega focus. And Jonathan, frankly, you represent it. So let me state it for the record, because although I think we've said it before, I'm not sure how much that's written down. And that is, Omega is all about the larger set of programs. How do we deal with that? And so, for a while we've been saying, hey, we're going to use tools to find vulnerabilities. That's still true. However, and Jonathan, you're very much representative of this. As we've talked about this, one of the things that's not happening in really any other place is the looking for those cases where a vulnerability is common across a very large number of projects and trying to get vulnerability patches proposed to a large set at once. Currently, pretty much every project works independently, and if you see a problem in one program, you report it, and it may get fixed in one. And so one of the things we basically have added to the Omega toolbox is, well, we already said that we were going to handle a large set. Perhaps the better way to handle a large set is to scale up by creating these more in a more automated fashion, these vulnerability fixes. We've said that in some circles, but I'm not sure how publicly that discussion has been made. And really, it's a tweaking as we go down this path of turning Omega from an idea into practice. Tell me if I said anything wrong, or you want to clarify something. Nope. Okay. And by the way, I keep pointing out poor Jonathan. But I was saying he represents it because, in our discussions, there's a huge number of really awesome security researchers, and that's great. On the other hand, when we started talking about, hey, how can we scale things up? It turned towards, well, wait a minute. Although there's lots of researchers, we only know of one who's focusing on the, how do I create a large set? And Jonathan's frankly the expert on that topic. So you ended up being the person we pulled in.
Apparently.
Sorry about that.
Yeah, I know. So there's now, Manuel, you know this, Sebastian, you may not. There's a SIG that's being formed under the Vulnerability Disclosure Working Group to focus on automated vulnerability disclosure as a topic that the OpenSSF discusses and is involved in.
Right. And now we are aware, I mean, there's pros and cons. The big pro to doing this, of course, is instead of the fixing onesies, twosies, we can start fixing broader common problems, which is something that, I think is, which not just me, but a lot of people think has value. There are the big negative that Jonathan's alluding to is that, typically each suggestion, each issue is written by a human. The patch is written by, if there's 300 different programs that need to be fixed, there's 300 different patches written by 300 different humans. And instead, creating automated tools where we really focus. The big risk, of course, is that it could look like a whole lot like spam, and that's not the goal. So we're so Jonathan right now is dealing with the unenviable task of trying to, work with larger community to make it clear this is not spam. We're trying to fix a real problem in a scalable way. And, I am sure that we've already gotten some pushback because it's new, it's different. And frankly, I think their developers are rightly worried that if you just run automated tools and they produce garbage, that they're going to be overwhelmed with garbage. I think that's a legitimate concern. I think that's a concern that can be addressed. But we're going to have to, work to make sure that we address it, and that's okay. I'm talking about some of the stuff you're working. So feel free to correct me and expand on.
Nope. I mean, I'm fully heads down in the weeds, actually writing the code to fix the vulnerable. Well, I'm currently working on data flow analysis for. I built data flow analysis inside of Open Rewrite to be have a certain set of characteristics that I needed for, short term, like this is what I needed for the Dan Kaminsky Fellowship, and now I'm like, this is not sufficient. We need more. So yeah. So that's at a high level. I should probably put together a document for the meeting today, discussing some of the proposals for like best practices that I consider around automated vulnerability disclosure, mostly from pulling from my slide deck of this is the things that I've learned and people have been shot in the foot by. So
by data flow analysis, Jonathan, do you mean just like reaching definition and like diffuse chains like those, or
what?
Like the reaching definition analysis and the diffuse chains, which are like the basic stuff.
I've never heard the term diffuse chains. No, I mean
diffuse chains.
What?
The definition and use chains. Diffuse chains.
Yeah, data flow traditionally flows from argument to variable argument to into the return value of the method, right? Like it can, but
set the value, use the value.
Right.
Definition.
But taint can also flow from the argument to the subject of the method call.
Yes.
Subject being also known as the qualifier. And so I currently support, flow from argument to return value of method, but not argument to
by argument you're let's use the terminology, right? So by argument you're meaning like the formal parameters, right? Or
arguments, the formal parameters to the method, correct?
Yes. Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
This is all local flow still. It's not
yeah, so I was getting to that if there's a method call and that has side effect, you're not able to capture that.
I'm working on that. That's the current thing that I'm trying to tackle. Is side effects of the qualifier. Side effects on the qualifier.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, Jonathan, I don't know if you can see what I am writing here, but
no, I also have a bunch of shiny graphs that I made for. I was working on adding I was adding control flow analysis for case switch statements. I haven't pulled up the meeting notes for this particular meeting. Notes agenda.
So which programming languages are you focusing for this first effort?
So previously I generated like 165 pull requests to fix zip slip across the Java ecosystem. I also fixed a vulnerability called temporary directory hijacking, partial path traversal, and temporary directory local information disclosure. So those are the three things that I tackle with automation. Long term would love to support stuff like SQL injection and stuff like that. but data flow analysis needs to be more complex to support that. So the data flow and control flow analysis that I'm working with only supports single file, not multi-file data flow and control flow analysis. And if you really want to tackle SQL injection, you really need that. But it's a bigger problem. Like first off, the problem of writing the data flow, and then there's the second problem of actually leveraging it to actually generate a fix.
Right, so this can look through, say, a Java source file. Is that the idea?
Yeah, I'm using, so Open Rewrite is a format preserving abstract syntax tree transformer. Yes. Oh, the other one that I tackled was zip slip, so that was right, I said that. Yeah. So using data flow and control flow analysis to determine, is this vulnerable to zip slip, and if so, fix it.
Right, I see. That's really interesting, because obviously parsing into an abstract syntax tree is difficult enough that compilers are a field of their own, and to then do that extra analysis sounds like a very challenging obstacle to get past.
Take a look at Open Rewrite, because they preserve all the white space and formatting, and then you can generate new ASTs inside of the tree to generate a diff, and the new ASTs will match the surrounding formatting.
Right, I see.
Yeah, and that's really, I think, the key step here is, creating a patch that we know won't be accepted is no bueno. So, being able to make it fit right into their existing software is key to this.
Yes.
Yeah, and I think, John, although it's automated creation, I think the notion was at least reviewing. Yeah, I've forgotten what the plan was for review of these proposals before they started going out. But
the changes, the diffs.
Yeah.
What in general as like a best practice, or in terms of like
in terms of alpha omega engagements?
I don't know. I mean, I've already written a lot.
We're still working on this.
So the short-term goal, right? I'm adding data flow and control, like additional data flow and control flow analysis. I already have recipes for zip slip and partial path reverse and all those things. Shorter term, the plan is basically I've run these campaigns myself as a one-off sort of event. And the longer term goal is short term goal is to set these things up as continuously running campaigns to automatically generate pull requests into the future, and that will mean that any cases of these vulnerabilities that actually appear in open source moving forward will just get cleaned up immediately.
But I think the goal is, at least what I suspect would be best, and so let's have this discussion. This is a public discussion. Would be, just like certain other tools that are highly critical, usually you start by, developing it and then releasing it out to a test community for, test it yourself, small test community, and then you grow out. In other words, it affects, say, 500 projects that we're going, let's create, but review by hand a set first before they even go out. And once we have confidence that yes, the changes are correct, then we start doing much more, basically doing it in stages, so that if there's a screw up in the automation, which is entirely possible, that we don't that we don't cause burn a lot of bridges and create a lot of ill will.
Correct. So that's so there's certain campaigns that I've already written that have already gone through those processes, and any new campaigns would of course go through those sorts of processes for the future.
Right. I think I know that you've done some of that before. I know that I think we ought to be careful about writing a lot of that down, because I think that I think that's important. I think that would also allay some of the concerns. Primarily, basically, that most developers are really busy, they're overwhelmed, and they don't want to have a lot of useless spam that they have to trudge through. And I think that's the main fear from the automation, is that is that they're going to end up with all these automated proposed changes that are garbage and will eat into their time. I think we can totally allay it. We just have to do it and explain how we're going to do that.
Yes. Oh, clearly defined. That's is that the project that that's the licensing project, Nick?
Yes.
Yes, apologies for arriving late.
No, you're fine.
I just wanted to learn a bit more. I just joined the OSI in this week, and I'm still learning. So just watching for now.
Paths cross again, Nick.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, and I guess the other thing would be coming back to the spamming thing, the worries about spamming and overwhelming. I imagine that we want to again do it incrementally, do it in batches. Whenever there's an indication that hey, we want to change 50 million programs, let's basically, do rate limiting or something to prevent. And error becoming a problem.
Yes.
Have you considered some kind of self-service online portal? So even when a project isn't part of your initial sort of test sample, people can voluntarily put their project on a list for the automation to run, and so to get a preview of what this kind of technology could help.
So for security fixes in general, if you're curious about Open Rewrite and Modern, they have their own SaaS, and you can opt in to getting your projects included in their data set. You can run any of the recipes that they have. For the security stuff in particular, maybe the idea is that the long-term vision is, so short term, right? Unfortunately, in order to fix vulnerabilities to scale across open source, you have to generate a pull request. You can't create a GitHub security advisory privately and disclose the vulnerability there, because GitHub doesn't have an API for automating the process of opening GHSAs. And so you end up, as you're fixing these vulnerabilities across open source, you end up ODing a bunch of projects. Long term, the idea is that we can, if GitHub can add an API to support opening GHSAs via an API, that we can work towards privately disclosing vulnerabilities at scale through automation. Yeah, I don't know. That doesn't quite answer your question, or maybe it does. I don't know. Unless, should you try rephrasing it? See if I can peg it.
Yeah, that's interesting. I suppose what I was referring to is the possibility of having an opt-in, explicit opt-in to this program. Because you mentioned earlier that you don't want to go and sort of spam everyone at the same time. You want to start out with a small sample, check that the results are high quality. But ultimately, some people will want to have a go first and kind of jump the gun.
So what I do is often run the recipes at scale across, as many projects as I can, and look at the results and make sure there's no glaring issues. So I'm doing the triaging first and looking at the results. Is there a place for that to give those to certain projects ahead of time? Yeah, that's not unreasonable. I can I could do that. That's actually pretty simple. There's a project in Modern called Modern Organizations, and if it's kind of tied to me and my name, but I could create a list of projects specifically that want early preview PRs to be part of that feedback.
Exactly, yeah.
I would suggest it be somewhere in between. In other words, by all means, Jonathan, first look through, filter out the ones aren't wrong, and then when it looks like it's okay, my thinking is, and I think this is what you've been doing anyway, is you start releasing it to a small set and then to a larger set, and right now, I think the thinking has been that small. I mean, you've been picking the smaller set, if I understand correctly. But I mean, if there's a group of projects that are especially active and that are interested, I mean, they could certainly be included in the initial tranche, as it were. You have a larger set you know it would apply to, but I'm guessing you want to start by sending it out to a small set, see if there's any screaming, complaining, and then grow it out. This is the same way that web browsers get deployed. You know, when Chrome releases a new version of Chrome, it's not true that everyone updates it once. There's a small, I think it's random set that gets it earlier, and then they slowly go out. And that way, if there's a big problem, they stop the deploy. There's a name for this, and it's
procedure. Yeah, it's like a slow rollout.
Yeah, there's something deploy, I think. There's a name for this when you're going to deploy it among a very large set of things, but you want to have early warning that there's a big problem. Hey, I'm deploying the new version of Chrome, but it doesn't work if you have an HP printer attached. I'm making this up.
Right.
But there is some subset of users that isn't everybody, so your test didn't catch it, but there's some weird quirky thing you didn't expect, and you want to get those warnings early.
There is a
phase deploy.
Yeah, phase rollout or something like that.
Yeah, something.
One other thing, Modern. I said this in the AO chat, or the private AO chat. Modern just added. So CodeQL indexes like 30,000 plus open source projects. And I had that list of projects, and I gave it to Modern and said, hey, can you create parity with that? And so they are starting an ingest job to hopefully create indexes to parity the number of projects that open rewrite, or sorry, the CodeQL indexes. My normal flow for security research is write a CodeQL query, see how widespread the vulnerability is, and then turn it into an open rewrite recipe to fix it. And so this will make it easier to just start with an open rewrite recipe, or make sure that what CodeQL finds for a result will actually be something that it will parity hopefully the scale of the fix that we can fix, the vulnerability, the open source project we can fix.
Okay, so I just did a lookup. It looks like phased rollout is one of the terms used. So let's use that at least for now. Basically, we could allow a project to opt in to be part of the first phase of a phased rollout. So at that point, you've done the analysis, you've looked across a very large set of projects, but that's not how we're going to deploy, because because even though you can see exactly what the code change is, maybe there's some weird surprise problem with it. And so, okay, it applies to let's say 1,000 program. We analyze 10. I'm making up these numbers. Analyze 10,000. It applies to 1,000. Obviously, you're real. You analyze 1,000,000. It applies to 1,000, but the first rollout is maybe to 50. And you look it over, everything looks good, or it could be 10. Let's make that simpler. So first rollout to 10, everything looks good. You hand reviewed, everything looks good. They're the first phase, and I don't have any problem with projects opting in. I guess the only concern I would be having is if that. I guess most of the ones are ones where it's not a grand secret that they're vulnerabilities, are they, or are they?
What?
I mean, basically, I guess the problem will be, basically, once you do the rollouts, information now has become visible that wasn't visible before.
Yeah, and like, anybody can theoretically run these recipes to see what projects I didn't report to.
Yeah, although I don't think you're releasing the recipes, at least early on, right?
No, they're all public. They're all part of the Modern. I mean, like, in order for them to get run on Modern SaaS, they have to be public, and there's a repository called rewrite-java- rewrite dash Java dash security. And all the recipes live there. That's where I'm like, writing them, testing them. That the jar gets built from that repository, deployed on their SaaS. I'm testing the recipes first.
Okay.
So yeah, like all that's happening in the public domain.
All right. So I guess, yeah, this all comes back to the challenge of the defender, which is you're trying to defend the software without helping the attacker too much. And it's always a judgment call and trade-offs, because obviously attackers can do analysis and find vulnerabilities and attack. That's what a whole lot of them do. If there's a way that we, go ahead.
So one idea is that the Git history often has a lot of contact details, which can be used to make private disclosures, even when GitHub itself doesn't provide that option.
Yeah, the lack of private disclosures has been a big challenge. I've been whining at GitHub for years, and whining is probably the accurate term here. They've heard from me too many times. The Tutu group as well.
So again, I'm just curious, David. What's the pushback from them? Like, what's the rationale? It all makes sense.
Which them? I'm sorry. Which them? Which them?
The from GitHub, like this private vulnerability reporting. It just makes sense.
Actually, the previous okay, the private discussion. So there hasn't actually been a pushback. To be fair, they're not saying, "Oh my gosh, we're not going to do it." Instead, sounds like a very good idea. We'll get to it.
They're not having. It's not opt out currently. It's currently opt in, and they. I've talked to Gray, and his response is, we just released this thing. We're not going to make it something that we give to everybody immediately. Like, we're not going to force it on everybody immediately. We can't do that.
Yeah. Let's see here. Okay, I just did a quick search because they've been saying this a while. So, and my apologies. I don't. There are a lot of things to keep up with. So I just did a quick web search, and I found that they've been saying for a while that they're going to support this. So it looks like they've actually finally added it. It's in beta. You have to configure to turn it on, though.
Yes.
Yeah, it was introduced in the GitHub Summit this year or last year. Yes, and so that was one of the big features that was introduced. But yeah, it is now opt-in and not opt-out, and they have initially had some. I mean, based on, again, public data, initially had some success on some people opting in, but then it has tapered off. And I mean, some of the stuff you need to probably I don't know. I mean, there's obviously some politics that, or some understanding that's behind this decision. Is just from somebody like myself who's outside. It just makes sense. So I'm just curious, like, if you have some insight about the rationale behind them not making it making it the default, and then people opt out if they don't like it.
I think it's primarily still in beta, and they don't want to force people to adopt a feature that they don't want to force people to adopt. GitHub is very, very careful. They don't want to have an opinion. They don't want to have. They want everybody to.
They don't want to make people angry.
They don't want to piss off maintainers, basically.
Yeah. And you know what? Having operated operational systems before, I actually salute the attitude. Really, there's nothing worse than a service that you don't directly control that constantly makes changes that screw up things that cost you lots of time. And I think in general, is that they've never told me, oh my gosh, this was a terrible idea. I mean, to be fair, This is back when Microsoft was acquiring GitHub. This was actually one of the things that they said that they did intend to do. So even before they were bought out, there was an agreement that they were going to do this. But they're rolling it out carefully. And while I would like to see this a lot faster and on by default, that's not the way they have chosen to do it. And I can't fault the conservative nature of some of this, in the sense that, it's just their general nature. I wish they would do something different, but I understand why they don't. So hopefully they'll turn it on by default. I have no trouble with them turning off something, but enabling someone to turn it off, that makes sense. But I don't know what the likelihood of them enabling this feature of a project is for enabling this feature if it's running on GitHub and it's important. I suspect we're going to find that answer out soon ourselves, Jonathan.
I am already, this will be an ongoing rah-rah. So we'll see.
Well, here's a weird thought. Maybe that's the vulnerability. In other words, every time that we run these tests and we find out that the project we haven't identified before, has this turned off, maybe what we can do is file an issue and say, hey, you should turn this on. Here's how to do that. Here's the link.
Yes. I mean, so we proposed, Yesenia and I worked, Yesenia created a data flow graph of how the ideal disclosure flow would work. And the ideal disclosure flow would be, hey, maintainer, we found a vulnerability in your project. We want to report it to you. Please open it. Please enable automated vulnerabilities, or please enable disclosure, private vulnerability disclosure. Otherwise, we'll open a pull request within 2 weeks, right? 14 days from now, there'll be an automated pull request opened against your repository. If you don't have a and so from there, we just we can encourage the maintainer to open it. Otherwise, we just open the pull request in public. You're muted.
Yeah, and I'm just not sure if that document is publicly visible at the moment, because I know, Jonathan, you're still working on
Which
it.
doc?
The one with the data flow that Jonathan was just speaking about.
Say that again. What was the thing about? What was the question about?
No question. I'm just saying that I don't think that document's publicly available yet.
No, it's not public. Well, yeah, it's not public. It's just, the reason the document was originally written as a submission to GitHub to say, hey, we want the original document prior to the flow, the flow diagram was to describe to GitHub, hey, this is a feature that we need. This is why we need it. This is how we would use it. Yeah.
Yeah, and indeed, if we only contact them when we have something to report, we can tell them we intend to report something to you, details to be TBD, but this is the way that we need to do it, and otherwise we'll just file it publicly in 2 weeks.
Sebastian, I don't want to cut off this topic, but I know Sebastian mentioned on the chat that he had another question.
Thank you. So if it's okay to move on, I've got another topic I'd like to bring, and how about it? All right. So last year I was looking at Robert Pike's quantifying criticality paper, which is of course an element which is quite important for this Alpha Omega project. and there were quite a few typographic kind of quirks, probably due to a Word PDF export or something. And so I've rewritten that in LaTeX, and was wondering if this was something that the group would like to take on and publish. So I can share it on my Zoom screen share. That's what it looks like. And
My goodness, LaTeX has shown up in my world again.
Wait, so why is this on? Why are you asking if we want to do this under AO specifically?
Well, I couldn't find out where to contact Rob Pike, and considering that this document is sort of providing the foundations for detecting this sort of the long tail of software projects, the important ones that are being let slip through the net, I thought I would ask here and see if you could point me in the right direction.
The criticality score. There's a working group for under the OpenSSF called identifying working group securing critical projects.
Yeah.
And that one
under there
probably
is
is the best place.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I mean, Alpha Omega uses their information as part of their data set. But if you want to change, well, I mean, we have already, so we can say it, okay. But for changes of how those are calculated, yeah, go back to the folks who actually control that. I will observe that the criticality score is a little bit of a misnomer because it really it uses data sources that you might not expect. It's really heavily focused on popularity and on things like changes, which aren't always, it aren't always the same as how critical it is in, say, an infrastructure, if that makes any sense. It does its best to measure certain things, and it sometimes doesn't measure things you might think it might, because some things are very, very hard to measure, turns out.
Yeah, okay. So I'll have a look at the that other working group within the OpenSSF and see if.
Yeah, or you can just contact the criticality score folks directly. I mean, I think there's you should be able to find within their project their contact. I mean, if you can't, contact the criticality working group. That's where they live. But changes for a particular project, contact the project directly is the simplest and best way typically. But if you have trouble doing that, yeah, absolutely, go to the working group. We'll get you handled.
Right, thank you. Bye.
All righty, yeah, and oh boy, yeah, this is funny because I do some mathematical things and LaTeX all over there. But yeah,
I mean, LaTeX has a learning curve, but I'm glad I put the time in because I mean, how else can you do big sigmas with logarithms and brackets all over the place? It's kind of necessity at that stage.
There are actually other alternatives, but carry forth and do good. So, but yeah, clearly in the mathematics world, LaTeX all over. So, okay, yeah. So anyway, yeah, I would contact them, and if you don't, if you can't contact the project, contact the working group. If you just can't get anything else, get a hold of me, and I will try to figure it out. But I don't think you should need to. You should be able to just contact those, those as well instead.
Righty, thank you.
Are we out of questions? So maybe I should ask a question for Jonathan. I will pretend I'm the public for the moment here, which is, so I know you've been working on trying to write some of this down so that other people can see and understand the plan. If nothing else, to kind of reduce the worries of some folks. Any idea when you'll get that those first things out for public comment, or at least more widespread comment?
The stuff about automated vulnerability disclosure.
Yeah.
I'm Sure, so the plan there is to do it a little differently. It's I mean, I'm basically going to take my Black Hat talk and turn it into, or the best practices chunk of the Black Hat DEF CON talk and turn it into a document that says, here are a set of best practices. I think that one of the things that I would love to see is one of the things coming out of this SIG could be a set of processes and policies around automating vulnerability fixing at scale across open source, such that if you follow these norms and best practices, you can flag your campaign, or you can have your campaign get signed off and say this campaign follows this best practices, like these sets of best practices that the Open Source Security Foundation has blessed.
Mhm.
So it puts some weight behind like this is not just somebody just doing this. This is somebody that's doing it, but with following a set of best practices that have been agreed upon by an industry group, working group.
Okay. Yeah,
That's
that makes sense. So yeah, I think that process makes sense. It's just we want to make sure that we get some sort of rough consensus on that publicly before we do too many of these things. I know you're simultaneously actually implementing campaigns, and we don't really want to stop that, because just writing documents in the end isn't what's helpful. It's the actual activity.
right. Yeah. It's just, I think that if we can come up with a set of guidelines that determine that a certain process is more or less blessed by the OpenSSF, like we can have the campaigns we do as AO follow those best practices, but others can feel free to engage in those sorts of campaigns to we can have this be cross industry, and it won't
Right.
just be us.
Won't just be us, right? Okay, yeah. Making it more general, it is an awesome direction. So
Yeah.
I don't want to kill that. It's just we definitely want to have review and all that good stuff while we prepare to have things that apply that process.
Yeah. Meanwhile, if anybody wants to help me build data flow and control flow analysis for the Java programming language, hit me up.
Programming languages.
Yeah. Well, so the concept behind Modern, one of the thoughts that Jonathan has at Modern and Open Rewrite is that you have grammar islands where they have a lot of languages that share enough similarities to one another that you can shoehorn like other languages into the ASTs of Java and then dump it back out. So for example, like you can write Kotlin, or you can have Kotlin be represented by the Java AST. You can manipulate that AST and then dump that back out and have it be Kotlin again, or JavaScript or Python. And so that's the vision, is that like ideally most of these security fixes, hopefully, potentially, possibly, will be cross-language compatible, because it will all be plugged into Open Rewrite, which will have this cross-language support. Ideally.
That's ideally is the operative word here.
Yeah, I know.
Let me. So I worked at Coverity, and Coverity they have this like central AST, and where they dump multiple languages into the same AST. But when we were building analysis, it was different analysis built for different languages, because it's not. I mean, the ASTs could be the same. The analysis isn't. Like they had like languages that shared stuff, but then there are other stuff that are unique. Like the analysis that you're writing for C++ is very, very different from what you're doing for Java, even though they were sharing a same like umbrella AST that they have created. So, I mean, I think focusing on whether languages can be represented by same AST, that's a different goal, which may apply for rewriting. But when you're actually doing this, like serious, like control flow, data flow related stuff, languages, they have their own nuances. Now, Java and Kotlin can share a lot, but Java and C, Java and Python, definitely not Java and Python. I mean, because they're vastly different languages. So even if their ASTs look the same, means nothing at all in terms of what the underlying thing is. So in C, for example, any variable is addressable, right? I mean, you can do an AND X or whatever. In Java, you can't. And so how do you write the same analysis in both of those cases? You just cannot. So that's something that I am just like I want to bring in from my experience in the industry and also definitely in the academia. That's one thing. About the Java analysis that you're doing, I mean, we have solutions for actually not even data. I mean, data flow is primitive for that matter. We have abstract interpretation in Java that does this kind of stuff. We discussed some of that during the CNS con, like regarding this thing. So specifically, like what exactly are you doing for SQL? I mean, I know that like for zip slip, you had a specific vulnerability. It was using a library or something, and then you were like modifying that library call or modifying the parameters, etc. And that's what solved it. With SQL, you were thinking of rewriting query strings that are formed by string concatenation into prepared statements. But that's going to solve the whole SQL problem, or yeah, I mean that's the plan. Are you looking into a broad scope like that, or are you looking into a specific CVE for SQL that was established, which is what you typically do, like specific CVE that got published, and you see that CVE is applicable to many, like more than one repositories, and then you write automated stuff for that. But from what we heard or what we discussed about SQL, you seem to be like looking into a more common problem than a specific CVE or anything. So is that what you're doing with SQL, or is it? Yeah, I mean, I'd like to understand a little bit more. Maybe we need to have a separate discussion.
Yeah, at a high level, it's mostly focused on so I haven't started anything for SQL, right? Like the at a high level, the idea would be, can we do taint tracking from like user supplied arguments to the location where those strings are getting appended? If we can, we know that string value can get tainted by an attacker. Let's see if we can rewrite this to be a prepared statement instead, right? Like that, you know, at a high level, that's it. It's not let's go after a specific CVE. It's let's go after the class of vulnerability and see if we can, you know, come up with a consistent way to fix it. And then, like, you know, start with a smaller scoped problem, build onto it, and add, and then we can get more and more cases of it.
Sure. And I showed you examples that, like for example, we can fix this kind of stuff, but not in all cases. You can't do that in like you see, like when you do interprocedural stuff, it gets complicated pretty quickly, so that even if you can follow the taints, you cannot really use that to like rewrite an SQL query. Rewriting an SQL query, which is now formed by a query string to then be formed as a prepared statement, is a whole different ballgame, because it might actually require you to change APIs and stuff, and you don't want to do that. It's not that simple. When you go beyond the procedure boundary, within procedure boundary, we can create with pretty much confidence. I've shown you examples, and in our case, like when we're doing a like intra-procedural change or within the procedure, that like success rate for that is like nearly like 85, 90% of the cases you can do that. If you do interprocedural on average, then the success rate becomes like 25, 30%, because like the data flow gets complicated pretty quickly. But the specific problem that you're solving, I showed you examples and such that we have already done that. So maybe that's where something that we can work or yeah, collaborate regarding that. And
Yeah.
that's a discussion to be had. Yeah, that we should be having in future.
Yeah. You know, that makes a lot of sense. I agree with you. No, I in general I agree with you, right? Like the way that you take any problem that's massive, you find the simplest solution, you build on it and add more and more support, right? Like I built data flow and control flow analysis for Open Rewrite, but only to the scope of what I actually needed in order to make the stuff work, right? If you need more and more and more, you build it, you build what you need at the time that you need it. And hopefully we can start somewhere and expand it to support more stuff. You are muted again.
Yeah, I mean, I'm getting ready to switch to the next meeting. I guess.
Yeah, I was going to say we're nearly at time, but my expectation of how we're going to move forward is that we're going to use a variety of tools to find a vulnerability.
Yes.
Many different ones, and then once we see a pattern that's likely to be in other places, that's
Exactly.
when we trick. So basically, tools like Coverity, many other tools, they can find a problem, which is awesome. But the next step is, oh wait, this thing seems to be all over. And so now we're talking about things like, why do data flow? Because that way we can make sure that the proposed fix is accurate for the other places. So it's not really for detection like a Coverity would be, but for these automated repair against multiple different programs.
Yes.
Does that distinction make any sense?
Yes.
Because I agree with you. Trying to rewrite a massive data flow engine for analysis across doing whole program analysis, that's a whole different ball game.
And it's solved by other people. So why?
It's solved by other people, right? Yeah. Exactly. So let's not do that. I think what Jonathan is talking to is enough data flow so that we make sure that the patches proposed are correct for the different programs.
Right.
And I got to run. Thank you,
All
everybody.
right. See you guys in the next meeting. Bye.
Bye.